Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. So today, I wanted to talk about the first episode of the Rings of Power series on Amazon Prime. I've actually watched the first 3 episodes so far. I just watched the third one today. But I do want to talk about each episode individually, just because they are kind of long. Each one is about a little over an hour long, and it seems like I think they're getting a little bit longer each time. I think episode 3 is like an hour and 5 minutes or something like that. But I'm going to talk about episode 1 today, and I'll talk about the other ones briefly, but just to kind of give my overall thoughts of the show so far without going into too much detail on the other 2 episodes. It's fine. I think it's got some potential. I can definitely see where there can be a good show in here. As of right now, it hasn't quite won me over, but I'm going to be patient. I want to wait until at least until the entire season comes out. So I think my understanding is this season is supposed to be 8 episodes, and I think that Amazon's greenlit 5 seasons, if I'm not mistaken. So. But yeah, first episode, of course, for those of you who may not be aware, this is a prequel series to the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, and it even takes place before the events of The Hobbit. This is thousands of years before the original trilogy, follows the elf from the original trilogy, Galadriel, played in the original trilogy by Cate Blanchett. In this one, it is played by, I should have had that pulled up. Let me see, Rings of Power, the cast list. The actress that plays her, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, hope I'm not butchering her name, Morfydd Clark. I believe she was in the movie Maude, if I'm not mistaken. I have to double check on that. But yeah, she plays Galadriel in this show instead of Cate Blanchett, because she is supposed to be the younger version of her. Let me see, just curious. Oh, Saint Maud. Yeah, I had that wrong. Saint Maud. So yeah, she is in there. Oh, she's also in the movie Crawl. Interesting. But yeah, so she plays Galadriel in this film. You have Robert Aramayo, I hope that's how you say his name, who plays the young Elrond. Of course, you remember him, played by Hugo Weaving in the original movie series. For those of you who may not recognize Robert, he was the actress that played young Ned Stark in Game of Thrones. I think it was in season 7, so it was in the flashback episode when they reveal who Jon Snow really is. As well as quite a few other actors and actresses, most of which I don't really quite recognize, except for Joseph, I hope I'm saying his name right, Joseph Maul, who was also in Game of Thrones. He was Uncle Benjen from that series. So, yeah, he's in this series. Everyone else, though, I think for the most part, I don't really know who the actors are. I'm not sure if they're relatively new actors and I just haven't seen them or not, but I'm not very familiar with most of the cast list on here. But regardless, yeah, just to kind of give a brief synopsis of the episode. Basically, it follows Galadriel when she's a much younger elfin soldier, essentially trying to find Sauron. So in this series, we learn that Sauron was the servant of another Dark Lord named Morgoth. The way Galadriel's actress says it, she rolls her R's in a way that I love the way she talks. I love listening to her talk in the show. I can't roll my R's like she can. Drives me nuts. But basically, she is on a quest to try to find Sauron and kill him, essentially because he killed and marked her brother with his sigil. And so basically, that's where the beginning of the show takes place. We see her traverse Icy Mountain, going into Old Fortress, an abandoned fortress with a bunch of other elves. And we see a pretty badass fight scene with them and an ice troll, where we get to see Galadriel essentially displaying her badass prowess, taking it out single-handedly, pretty much without anyone else's help. Right off the bat, I'm just going to go ahead and say, this show, the sweeping landscapes that we see in it are really awesome to watch. I mean, if nothing else, if you're going to grade this show purely on spectacle, I would say it definitely gets high marks there. But I mean it better. I think the budget for the whole season was like $1 billion, so like each episode's going to have the budget of roughly the budget of like a summer blockbuster movie. So yeah, it better look good for how much money they're pumping into it. But yeah, it's the show looks really good. I think the cast everybody does a pretty good job playing their respective roles in this show. Like I said, I think the two standouts for me are definitely Clark and Aramayo as Galadriel and Elrond specifically. The scenes we get between those two in this first episode, we don't get a lot between them. There's really only a couple scenes where we get to see them talk, and they're done pretty well. You definitely get the sense that these are two old friends who have history together. I particularly like the actor who plays Elrond. I think he really does a great job with his respective character in this episode. But yeah, there's and of course, like in Game of Thrones and a lot of other shows you see now, it follows a couple other storylines. We get to see the Harfoots, basically the ancestors of the hobbits from the original trilogy. There's a caravan of them basically traveling the lands. They essentially hide from humans and anybody else who they deem as outsiders, and that's kind of how they've survived. So they're basically a traveling caravan that just kind of travels around the lands and stuff like that. And then there's another story with an elf soldier named Arondir, who is basically keeping watch over a small town of humans. And we also see that he has a relationship with one of the humans. They're a human woman named Bronwyn. I think that's how you say her name. And so we get to see there's kind of a looming evil in this village, where you see like there's some animals that are getting sick, and then the woman who has a son who has this mysterious, it's like a sword hilt which bears the mark of Sauron on it. So curious to see where that goes. Where I'm at in the show, I've seen a little bit more with that reveal, but not a whole lot. So I'm curious to see where they go with that. And then, of course, we get to the big reveal at the end of the episode is with the Harfoots. One of the characters named Nori. She basically discovers a shooting star that lands near their encampment, and at the very center of the crater appears to be what looks to be like a human, unconscious from the impact. And basically, that's where the episode leaves off. But yeah, as far as like first episodes go, I would say this didn't. There were definitely moments in this episode that were interesting to watch. I can't quite say that it that it hooked me, I guess would be a good way of putting it. But like I said, I'm trying to be patient with this series. But as far as like all the negative comments I've been hearing about it so far, I don't know. I mean, I see a lot of people review bombing this show, and I do think that, again, I'm only 3 episodes in. While I do think that it definitely it leaves a lot to be desired so far, it definitely feels like it's building towards something big. I do kind of wish that we got more, I guess, bigger, more epic things happening. It just kind of feels like there's a lot that it's trying to set up, and I guess I'm just waiting for the payoff. But this is the first episode, so obviously I'm not going to be too harsh on this one. Like I said, the sweeping landscapes where you get to see more of the different countries in this place, like the place the elves are from, which I can't remember what it's called, but Numenor is one of them, and then of course Middle Earth. It's cool to see these different places, and then of course the musical score is also great too. It doesn't quite have that same, epicness that the original score from Lord of the Rings had, but it's still pretty good. And then like the opening cinematic for the show too is pretty interesting as well. It kind of ties in with the theme of the show pretty well, like rings of power, the different symbols in there. So I like what look like grains of sand they use for like the ring symbols in the opening sequence. So that's kind of cool to see. But yeah, like acting wise, I think all of the actors do a good job with their respective roles in this, with what they're given to work with. I just don't think the dialogue's not particularly that interesting. And then, like I said, a lot of the characters, with the exception of like Nori and maybe Elrond and Galadriel, not very many of the characters are that interesting, at least not in my opinion right now. I would say Nori is probably the most interesting out of all of them. But the actress that plays Galadriel, so one thing that's kind of surprised me about this is all the hate that she's been getting. Well, I guess not her specifically, but I guess her character. And I don't know if the hatred is pointed towards her performance or just maybe the writing of her character, or maybe a combination of the two. I think her performance is fine. Her dialogue is okay, I guess. I know a lot of people have been kind of, I guess, bitching about the fact that she seems very defiant. Like she, in the beginning of the episode, she defies the orders of her king because she's trying to hunt Sauron and she's hell-bent on catching him. I mean, I am going to kind of come to her defense a little bit here. I mean, I can kind of understand it. She's trying to avenge her dead brother, so I guess I can kind of understand where she's coming from on some level. I don't know. I feel like her character gets a little bit more hate than she deserves. I think she's fine. And she has her moments in the show where it's almost kind of funny in a way, like her defiance towards others. I almost kind of find it sort of endearing. It's an interesting trait of her character. The only thing about this show so far, and I am kind of talking about not just this episode, but also episodes 2 and 3 as well, that I'm kind of curious if they're going to address this, is so Galadriel in this show seems hell-bent on finding Sauron, but in the original trilogy, she doesn't seem like she has that same desire to take him down. She doesn't even really offer much assistance to the Fellowship to destroy the ring, other than giving them boats and a few supplies and stuff like that, and that light that she gives to Frodo that he uses in the cave against the spider. And in this show, she seems like almost like obsessed with trying to find Sauron. So I guess I'm kind of curious if they're going to address like what changed about her between this and the Lord of the Rings series. Again, this takes place thousands of years before that, so obviously a lot can change in that time. So as far as like any other issues I have with this show or just shortcomings on it, yeah, I think I mentioned before, like the writing feels a little bit weak in some parts, and I definitely will say it. That trend seems to continue in the other 2 episodes. I'll kind of get into that a little bit more. I do think that episodes 2 and 3 do start to get a little bit better, in my opinion. Again, I'm trying to be patient with this show. Sometimes it can take a show quite a while to find its footing or its voice. And I feel like right now this show is definitely more style over substance. It's definitely pretty to look at, but it just doesn't feel like there's a whole lot there beneath the surface. And also, too, just I do feel like the dialogue in this show does feel a little less natural than it did in the original trilogy. But a lot of that is because the original trilogy, was borrowing lines that were actually from the books. This, I think, is supposed to borrow some elements from the book, the Silmarillion. I hope I'm probably screwed that name up so bad. I think it's using some parts from that story, but for the most part, I think this is supposed to be just its own unique, self-contained story. And so because of that, I do think some moments of dialogue can feel a little forced and kind of awkward, I guess. They don't feel quite as natural as they could, I guess, in my opinion. Like there's this exchange between Galadriel and Elrond in the first episode where he's trying to convince her to stop hunting down Sauron and to just let it go and to move on. And she basically they kind of have this little back and forth where she keeps saying, "You have not seen what I have seen," and the back and forth between them is a little awkward in that part. I don't think it's anything terrible, but it definitely feels kind of clunky. And there's definitely quite a bit of that in the first episode. Also, too, I just, like, so far, like, while I would say Galadriel is supposed to be kind of the main character of the show, I do feel like out of the 3 main characters, who I think are her, the Harfoot Nori, and the elf warrior Arondir, none of them are particularly that interesting. I think Nori is probably the most likable out of all 3 of them. Arondir, I don't really feel like there's a whole lot to his personality. I'm hoping that we get more of that later on. He just kind of seems like the badass warrior, which I'm all for. I don't mind that, like the strong silent type. But beyond that, I don't really feel like there's a whole lot to his character. So hopefully maybe we get a little bit more from him too. But like Galadriel, I just feel like right now there's not a whole lot to her beyond her need for vengeance. So I'm really hoping that the show will, I guess, give us more depth to her character from that. But the actress who plays her, I really do think that she gives a pretty good performance in this. The emotional cues that she has, at least in the first episode, are really well done. There are some scenes where she sheds some tears talking about, her desire to avenge her brother, that I feel like she could have easily just kind of phoned it in a little bit, and she doesn't. It does feel like that the actress Clark really is giving a really good performance in this, and I have to give her credit there. This actually makes me want to watch the movie Saint Maud now that I know that she's in there. It also doesn't help that she's actually very easy on the eyes too. Yeah, I'd be lying if I said I don't. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't developing a little bit of a crush on her watching her in this show. If nothing else, I may finish watching the show just so I can kind of see, how she does as Galadriel. But regardless, I mean, I think that this show it has potential. And like I said, as far as the first episode goes, it didn't quite hook me, but it has me interested, which I think is more than I was expecting. I tried to go into the show, as blind as I could, not knowing hardly anything about it. I tried to avoid as many reviews as I could because there are a lot of bad ones out there for it. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't quite agree with all of them, but I do think some of them are a little bit more harsh than this show deserves. I'm hoping that we're going to get something out of this. There are little moments in this episode that I felt like we were getting some of what we saw in the original trilogy. Like, one thing about the original Lord of the Rings trilogy, particularly the very first movie, Fellowship of the Ring, that I really liked was the gritty fight scenes. You really kind of got the sense that these characters were in danger, and these were, incredibly difficult battles that they were going into. And in this episode, I think we didn't get a whole lot of that. There's really only one scene, but I do feel like it almost for a split second captures that same feeling. It's where we see Galadriel's brother in a battle with a bunch of orcs. And you can see like there's fire everywhere. They're covered in mud. They're dirty. It's gritty and grimy, and like they're trying to fight their way through it. And to me, that moment, I was like, yeah, that feels like something you would see in the Fellowship of the Ring. Like in that movie, there's a lot of moments where you see like it's almost like really quick, violent moments. Like there's a part in where they fight the orcs in Moria, and you see a part where Aragorn, cuts off an orc's head. If you watch, there's a split second where you see like its blood come up out of its neck from when he did that, and it's so quick it's easy to miss. But it's little things like that, just little gritty things in combat in Lord of the Rings that I always liked. Little details that they added in there that they didn't need to. And there is at least one scene of that in the first episode of Rings of Power. Unfortunately, once that scene's over with, we don't get much more of that. There's not a lot of fighting in this show, at least so far. And that's something I'm hoping that I'm going to see more of as it goes on. Because there were definitely a lot of fights in the original trilogy. I think that's kind of one of the main things it was popular for was the fights. That's one of the things I always remembered from it. The Battle of Moria, Helm's Deep, the battle in Gondor when they fight against the giant elephants. I mean, there's a lot of awesome fights in the original trilogy. And just given the budget of this show, I mean, I really hope that we get to see some of that too. I feel like there'd almost be a waste of money if they didn't. So hopefully we're going to see maybe where some of that budget goes to. But yeah, I would say I am cautiously optimistic on this show. I would say and I'm kind of going off of the first 3 episodes, it hasn't quite won me over, but there is definitely, I feel like there's something there. So I would say this is definitely worth checking out if you are a diehard Lord of the Rings fan, or even, I would say even if you're just a casual Lord of the Rings fan. I think this show is worth at least watching once, just to kind of make your own decision about it, whether or not you like it. If you're not into like that high fantasy type stories, this may not be for you. I think it definitely is counting on the audience already being familiar with the Lord of the Rings series. Just because like it does a decent job of explaining like, who the characters are, Galadriel, Sauron, Elrond, all of them. But I think there is definitely that expectation that the audience kind of comes into this with at least some background information on the lore. So just kind of keep that in mind if you do decide to watch this, but you're not very familiar with the old movies. So, which is depressing to think about that those movies are old now. But yeah, the original Lord of the Rings, I think, came out in 2001. So yeah, it's 21 years old now. So that is depressing to think about. But yeah, that's my 2 cents on the first episode. Like I said, I'm going to try to talk about each episode separately, throughout my podcast, just because they're relatively long. So yeah, if they get any longer, each one's going to be almost like a feature-length film. So we'll see. All right, and then next I just wanted to talk about the trailer for the new Hellraiser movie coming out on Hulu. So this movie comes out, I believe it's October 7th. Let me double check real quick just to make sure I don't lie to you. Let's see, release date October 4th in Santa Monica, but it comes out on Hulu October 7th. Okay. Yep, so saw the trailer for this the other day. I feel like I heard rumors about a Hellraiser remake. Now, I don't know if they did another one a few years ago. I feel like there was one that came out not too long ago, but I never watched it. To be honest, I've kind of fallen out of the Hellraiser franchise for a while. I mean, I was never a huge fan of it. It was okay. I watched the first one, the second one, and then I watched Bloodline, the one where Pinhead goes into space, I think, whichever one that was. I think it was the fourth one. I have not seen any of the others in the series. I don't even know how many there are, but I know there's quite a few. And from what I've heard, after two, it sounds like they get pretty bad. So, so yeah, like just a little background on my history with the Hellraiser series. I saw the very first movie when I was maybe in middle school. I was quite a bit younger. And it never scared me, but I remember just the body horror images in that movie really freaked me out. It's a very gory movie. And the sequel's gory as well, but the first one especially was really gory. And I just remember being like almost traumatized by like some of just like the gory stuff that you see in there, like people getting torn apart by chains, the Frank Cotton, the guy who starts off like as a skinless corpse who feeds on people to try to regenerate his body. That, oh God, just... that movie made me not want to eat for a long time. So, but it's it's gained a cult classic following, so I get it. It's a popular movie, and it's good. I mean, I think it's a good scary film. So they are doing the new movie, which I guess is supposed to be sort of like a reboot / remake of the series. My understanding is it's not supposed to have anything to do with the previous films. I think it's supposed to be its own standalone film, is my understanding. And basically it looks like it is going to, I guess, borrow some elements from the first movie where we see like the puzzle box and stuff. It looks like it's kind of doing like a new introduction with that, where you see this character trying to solve it. And it looks like they're in this house that is also, I guess, itself kind of a puzzle. I noticed in the trailer, like it looks like this character, he changes a few things in the puzzle box. Like he turns parts of it. And then there's a part where like a secret door in the house opens up. Now, I don't know if maybe they did that in the trailer just to make it look like there's a connection between the two, but that would be kind of interesting if it was. Like if there was like some kind of connection between the, what's it called, the lament configuration and the actual house that they're in. And it looks like there's this character who's trying to trick people into solving the box. I noticed in the trailer, like he tells the guy, you got to solve the puzzle, and then the guy says, do I get a prize or whatever? And then the sketchy guy says, I do. And then he gives like that, evil little smile as the guy solves it. And then of course we see the guy solve the puzzle box, and then of course it looks like it's very quick and it's kind of hard to see, but it looks like something grabs his leg, and it almost looks like a chain pulling him towards somewhere, which of course if you've seen the original Hellraiser, you know that it's most likely Pinhead, and that guy is pretty much screwed. But yeah, and then it looks like I like the design of Pinhead in this movie. Pinhead in this one is played by, let me look up the name of the person that plays them. That person is Jamie Clayton as Pinhead. Yeah, I like the design of Pinhead in this movie. I mean, they kept the iconic look with the pins and the head and all that stuff, because of course that's what Pinhead is known for. And for the most part, I mean, the design looks pretty much the same as it did in the original movie, so that's cool. I like that Pinhead looks very recognizable. I also noticed that a couple other Cenobites are in this as well. It looks like, is it Chatterer, the guy with the chattering teeth? I believe it looks like he's in this. We get to see a glimpse of him in the trailer. I can't believe I remember his name from the original movie. I didn't see the other ones though. I don't remember what I think one of them, there was like a fat one named Butterball or something like that. Let me see. I gotta look that up. Butterball. I fucking called it. Oh my god, he's disgusting looking. Ugh, that's disgusting. Okay. I should not have looked that up. Now I'm not going to want to eat later. Okay, let's see. Butterball. I keep wanting to call him Butterbean, but that's the old boxer. I was watching Celebrity Family Feud the other night, and they had the guys from Jackass on there, and they had Butterbean with them, which I don't know why. He was in the first movie, but as far as I'm aware, he wasn't in any other skits. Oh well. I'm getting way off track here. Let's see. Chatterer, Cenobite. Let's see. Yep. So Chatterer is in this, but I mean, he's kind of an iconic Cenobite too. Even though I don't think he ever has any lines in the original, it's just his chattering teeth was kind of iconic in that film, which is funny because he's like a side character, and a lot of people don't even really know who he is. But we do get a brief glimpse of him in this, and then of course we get to see the iconic chains that Pinhead uses to kill people. It's beyond that, there's not a whole lot to the trailer. We just get a brief glimpse of Pinhead and Chatterer. We get to see what looks like the dimension that they're from, their version of hell. We see, I'm going to go ahead and say, I think is it the Leviathan? I remember they reveal this in the second movie where there's like this demon that the Cenobites worship. I think it's called the Leviathan. It looks like we see a glimpse of that in this movie. We see there's like a shot in their dimension, and we see something coming down from the sky. It almost looks like some kind of contraption, which I think from the first, or from Hellraiser 2, I think was the Leviathan contraption, which could turn people into Cenobites. I can't believe I remember all this stuff. I've only seen Hellraiser 2 like maybe a couple of times, but it just really stuck with me for some reason. But yeah, I'm curious to see this movie. I like the look of it, for sure. It definitely looks like it has a very dark and grimy look to it, so I'm definitely digging that for sure. And just coming into this trailer, not knowing a whole lot about this, I'm pleasantly surprised by how good it looks. I am going to say that I'm going to reserve judgment for when it comes out, though. I'm not trying to get too hyped about this. One, because I'm not really a huge fan of Hellraiser to begin with. It's fine. It's just not one of my personal favorite movies. I'm not a huge fan of gore. At least in those movies, the gore does serve a purpose, so it doesn't feel like it's gory just for the sake of being gory, but even then it's still disgusting to watch. I remember, oh my god, in the first movie, I shouldn't be thinking about this because it's going to make me not want to eat anything for a while, but I remember there's a few scenes in there that just really grossed me out. The fucking scene with, the scene when Frank first comes back out of the floorboards, like when the dad cuts his hand or something and like the blood falls on the floor and then Frank starts to slowly resurrect, and you just see like the image of him, like his body regenerating and like his muscles and veins coming back and stuff. And it's just like, I think I read that the way they did that was they built a full-size model of him out of just various, I don't even know, like plastic and whatever. And then they just melted it down. And then what they did was they just filmed that in reverse to make it look like he was regenerating. And it looks really good. Even to this day, it holds up as far as special effects go, but it's fucking disgusting to watch. And then, of course, there's a bunch of disgusting-ass scenes in there. When he fucking kills people and absorbs their blood, that shit always almost made me puke when I was younger. And then, of course, the ending, which is almost comical now, when he gets torn apart by Pinhead's chains that they hook into him, and he gets stretched in like 100 different directions. And it just looks like something out of Looney Tunes now. It kind of cracks me up, honestly. Excuse me. And then Hellraiser 2, I remember bits and pieces of it. I just remember like there was a doctor in there. I can't remember his name though, but he gets turned into a freaking Cenobite, and he has like this weird little thing on his head that makes him shoot out these little like fucking like knives or whatever. And I just remember there's a scene in that movie where he fights like Pinhead and the other Cenobites, and it's like the most anticlimactic scene ever, because it's like they build up Pinhead for being such a badass, and then he gets taken out by this Dr. Cenobite jackass in like 2 seconds. I just remember thinking like, wow, really? All that for nothing. All right, whatever. Yeah. And then, what was it? Oh yeah, I remember, it's so funny. In the very first Hellraiser movie, there's this creature in there I think it's called the Engineer. And I remember when I was a kid, and this fucking monster used to scare the shit out of me. It's in this part where, like, the girl Kirsty is going through this dark hallway that opens up in this hospital room. And she gets to this part of the hallway where there's, like, you see this creature start coming after her, and that's the Engineer creature. It looks like this weird little fucking, like, just... It looks like a giant Krang from Ninja Turtles, but like with arms and legs and shit. And it's like crawling after her. And like it's the special effects in this thing are so bad. Like you can see like if you watch closely, you can see like it's on like a trolley or something, and if you look closely, you can almost like see people pushing it from behind, and it just looks so fucking bad. Like the rest of the practical effects in that film look fine, but I just remember that one stuck out to me as being particularly bad. Like as a kid, it scared me. As an adult, I watch it and I laugh now. That whole movie doesn't bother me like it used to. I think as a kid, it kind of freaked me out a little bit because of how gory it was, like I said before. But as an adult, I don't watch it. But I can see its appeal, but it doesn't bother me that much anymore. It's just one of those movies like I can't watch it while I'm eating, especially something that's like red and saucy, like freaking spaghetti or something. I cannot eat anything like that. Watching Hellraiser, gore. I don't like gore. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna check out the new Hellraiser when it comes out. That might be another review I do for the show. I guess it depends. Depends on how it is, I guess. It kind of, I'm kind of getting the same vibes from this trailer as I did from the new Chainsaw Massacre when that came out. I remember it looked good from the trailer, or it at least looked interesting, and then I watched it and it was just almost laughably forgettable and not very good. So hopefully this movie won't have the same impact on me, but I'll reserve judgment for when I watch it. But if I feel like it's worth talking about, then you all can look for a review for it on my podcast. All right, guys, I think that's going to be all I have to talk about today. Once again, I am on Anchor, Spotify, and YouTube. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will catch you guys next time. Later.